project that well, so please, give me a sign if you need more volume from some region in this space. So thank you so much, Anne Gochenour, our gallery director here, and also the curator for this show, for including me in this show. It's a huge honor to have been invited to exhibit along with these amazing artists. I'm really honored to be alongside Anne and Sally and all of the other artists in this show. It's an honor to be able to show my work locally. We don't have a lot of opportunities to show our work here. I also run a gallery, but I'm not ever going to show my own work. and it is just a real honor to get to share my work with all of you here and have you all here. So thank you all for showing up. This is amazing to have such a great crowd over here. So, I am a person who is not a traditional fiber artist. I was not trained as a fiber artist in a traditional sense. I have my my undergraduate degree in painting and sculpture, and I have my master's degree from the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in sculpture. I came to this circuitously, but I was raised by seamstresses. Both grandmothers were seamstresses. One of them was a lifelong quilter who worked much like me, very laboriously, late into the night, night after night, and sewed every stitch by hand. She did not own an electric machine. Wow. She sewed everything she ever made by hand. She made all her children's clothing. She worked in a jacket factory. That's the only place she had a machine. So I was really influenced by her. Her picture hangs in my studio right above where I work, and she is ever present in everything I do. That's my grandma Whitebread, Wilma Whitebread. and my mom sewed all of our clothes when I was growing up as well. So I learned to sew from all of them. When Anne mentioned the bicentennial, I grew up in Philadelphia. And so I was 4 years old at the time of the bicentennial. There was a huge parade in Philadelphia for the bicentennial. My mom made my sister and I these little bicentennial dresses with little bonnets, and they were yellow and floral and very bicentennial. and it just reminded me that brought up that memory. But also, Sally was mentioning an artist by the name of Magdalena Abakinovich, and I'm very indebted to her. Because she's my daughter's namesake. My daughter is named after her. And she was one of my earliest influences as an artist. When I sort of went from, I have a very traditional background in sculpture. I was trained as a figurative sculptor. I taught figurative sculpture. I taught mold making, casting, bronze casting, plaster mold making, rubber mold making, all the very traditional processes. And I used the figure to make large-scale installations. So I started doing a lot of work where I would cast many figures and life-size figures and put them in an environment where the viewer would become part of the environment. And Magdalena Abakinovich was one of my biggest influences in that realm. She is a sculptor. Sally mentioned her already, but in the fibers context, I was influenced by her fiber work as well as her figurative work. You might know some of her work if you don't know her already. If you've been to Chicago and you've seen those large bronze figures that are headless with kind of walking through the square south of the museum area. I think that's south. I'm not sure about my geography there, but that's her. She's somebody that I'm very indebted to as an influence. So it's interesting that she comes up because Sally was asking me about influences, and I was thinking how even though she is an influence, she's not directly related to this work. And then I realized, you know what? When I got the idea for the cloak, I am certain it was influenced by all my visual records of her fiber work, which she has these very large fiber pieces, just these gorgeous wall hangings that absolutely have to be in my visual vocabulary that informed my inclination to move toward making this cloak. So what I consider myself is an installation sculptor, and I like to say that I use whatever material the idea demands. And so often for me that comes through the forms of fiber, but it is not because I consider myself a fiber artist. when I moved to Mount Pleasant and was a mother of young children, I also no longer had a studio space. So I moved indoors and I started having to work modularly and work on things that I could get out and put back and get out and put back and add to and keep coming back to with the very small windows of time that I had as a mother of young children. And that wasn't always easy, but I might have an hour and spend 50 minutes of that just figuring out where I left off before it's time to pack it up and get dinner on the same table I was trying to work on. And it's a complex, beautiful, and not always easy life being a person who works as a mother and is also trying to be a practicing artist. And so that led me to I started to make a lot of work that originated from sewing, because it was my roots. I wanted to be a fashion designer when I was younger, so I made all my clothes when I was in high school. I became an artist by way of fashion. So I ended up deciding that industry was not at all for me, and I liked the drawing aspect of preparing the designs, and so I went that route. But I returned to it as a mother, and I'll kind of leave it at that and come to the work itself that's here. I'll talk a little bit about the commonalities of the work, because I tend to, they originate from similar places, even though I have two pieces here. The one on the wall is the cloak that's hanging straight back, and that's called the Good Mother Cloak. And then I have the installation that is on both sides on the floor, and that's called A Soft Place to Land, with the parenthetical, Rest in Peace. And so I'm very drawn to the materiality of things, the material poetry, or what some people would call the material identity, and in my mind I like to think of it as the material memory. Like, everything has a memory, the life that it held, right? Like, you might have a chair, the wood on a chair, it's totally now seeming inanimate, but it came from a tree, and now it also has this worn place where everybody has sat on it over and over and over and over again, or the place where the hand grabs the back of the chair. Like, that's the material memory. That's the memory of the experience that's trapped in my mind. I see these things as all having stories trapped within them, or having bigger stories yet to tell. And so I'm drawn to these materials, and I don't always know why. It just might be an intuitive thing where I find something, I see something, and something tells me, collect that, save that, bring that back to the studio. I might be drawn to it for its visual metaphor, or the metaphor that I feel from it. It might be an energy, it might be the beauty of it, it might just be an intuition that says, you're gonna want that later. I've saved every piece of hair from my kids' haircut since they were born. I've saved every hairbrush cleaning out since my kids were born, every dryer sheet. I collect gray flowers on the ground every place I walk. Like, just anything that calls to me. And so with this piece, obviously you can see I've been collecting nests. And I don't always know why or what they're going to be. I mean, I'm very drawn to the nest as a metaphor and as a beautiful form, as something that tells a really big story of so many things, instinct, duty, care, trust, protection, sacrifice, like when a mother bird sits on the nest in all weather, right, to protect those eggs that are in there through so many conditions, because the priority is protection. And so I've been saving the nest. It's always a beautiful thing when I sit with them for so long, years. I sit with some of these materials, listening, waiting for them to tell me what they want to be, thinking about them, and existing with them, and until it's revealed. And then, once I get the image, or the way that I like to say I work is I usually get kind of a flash image, and then I decide, is that worth chasing or not? Is that something that I want to follow down the path of spending however long, a year or whatever it's going to be, to bring it to fruition? And so in this case, that leads me to, I had these laundry baskets, which they used to be my kids' toy baskets. I used to, when my kids were little, I had these 6 upright woven baskets, and we would sort all the toys in them. And then when the kids got beyond the age of needing to sort their toys, I started using them as laundry baskets. And they started to deteriorate. They went through a lot. So, because I'm a sculptor and I see everything as potential material, when they deteriorated, I thought, well, that's good material. I'm going to harvest that material. So I started deconstructing those laundry baskets. Because intuitively I thought, there's a poetry in there, there's a story in there, there's a deep history in there from all this duty, sacrifice, mothering. I have a lot of work related to being a mother. And I didn't know what it would become. But as I was unraveling it, I was simultaneously listening to a lot of podcasts, audiobooks, which I tend to do when I'm working. I feel like I'm a big receptacle for listening when my hands are busy. And so I was listening to one of my heroes, one of my favorite people for the 18th time, or that's a random number, but Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass on audio. And she was in the area of the book about being a good mother. And I already had a series called My Good Mother Projects, where I was collecting works about motherhood. And so my senses went like really lit up, and instantly I pictured this laundry basket like this big heavy cloak on my back covered in nests. And so it really came from her talking about, in that section, she's talking about a pond in her yard and cleaning the pond day after day after day, trying to be a good mother, trying to make a place where her kids could swim, where the water was safe, where she could offer this experience to her children. And while she was doing it, she was destroying all kinds of life forms that were necessary. She's a biologist, a botanist, and a Potawatomi woman who is combining her indigenous wisdom and her biological research, her botanical research together to share her wisdom throughout life. But in this story, she knows which things are invasive, what she has to get rid of, what she has to keep fighting against, I'm using loosely, to clear the waters. And she becomes aware that she's killing off life forms that other mothers in nature are dependent upon to feed their children. And so she starts questioning, what makes a good mother? We're all just struggling and fighting through this life to be the best caregivers to whomever we're trying to care for. And it's a resonant question for me, because as a mother who's a working artist and also works a day job, I'm questioning that constantly. You have to sacrifice a lot of life in order to make art. You have to. I have to make choices. So am I going to do the dishes? Am I going to fold the laundry? Am I going to be at this event? Am I going to, whatever thing it is, or am I going to get to my studio again? And those choices are daily and difficult. And it's only through opportunities like this that I get a chance to force the prioritization, to say, this is the choice I have to make, I have a deadline. Long story short, through that inspiration, I started thinking a lot about what it means to be a good mother for me. And this cloak for me, quickly, the side story is it's also the product of my garden. So I'm also a gardener. I have a pretty elaborate garden where all the story about the laundry baskets. I made all these notes for myself so that I would stay on track, because it's tough, in case you can't tell, but I'm not using them. And so the laundry basket story is that those became the vertical weave of this cloak. So everything that's upright was from the laundry baskets that were disassembled. And then at the same time I was growing this garden, and I started harvesting the plants and drying the material. From that, I braided cordage. I made cordage, which is another word for rope, and I made rope from all the plants in my garden that became the horizontal weave that held the cloak together. And so it's a labor of a lot of love, a lot of nurturing, merging my life as a mother with my life as an artist, with my life in nature and as a nature enthusiast and environmental preservation advocate. And so really it just was months and months and months and months of cordage making, weaving into the cloak, and processing what did this all mean to me while I was making it. And really, this piece for me became a story of how do I move through the world I wanted it to become like a visual representation of moving through the world, offering care, offering safety, offering this trailing, heavy representation of I want it to feel like a blanket too. Like I want cloak to have duality of meaning, lots of things. And I don't care if you know any of this. For me, it's most important that the works evoke a visceral sensibility, that you feel something from them, and then get curious about what they could be meaning. But it doesn't matter to me if any of what I intend comes through. But I wanted it to represent that it is wearable. I have worn it and have that heaviness, that feel of the silent burdens we all carry, the inclination toward caregiving. Both of these pieces to me are a representation of what I feel is like an urgency toward the need for tending and nurturing in times of environmental and societal turmoil. And that's where we are, I feel like right now. And so I do feel in my work that I'm calling us, I'm asking people to witness things, to pay attention to what's around you, to care, and to think about ideas of nurturing and caregiving. And that's really what this other piece is about, in short, the rest in peace, or the soft place to land. Those are pillows I made from a quilt in my house. Quilts in my house that I cut up, and they're impregnated with wax, so they're rigid and solid. And then I made cordage that is like a little nest bed for each object, and these are all objects I found, or nature remnants that I found throughout time, that I wanted to give a place to be witnessed. And so that's the long and short of it. There's so much more that I could say, and I'm going to stop right there. Thank you so much for listening.